whereby the risk is going to be great no matter what you do to the best of your ability, simply because it's going to be so much warmer and probably significantly drier in long stretches, that you're going to have bush that's conditioned to burn very rapidly and very intensively, despite the best local management approaches. So I would, by all means, agree with what Paul and Corin are saying, but saying simultaneously, it's not either or, it's both and. We've got to get on top of industrial emissions and transport emissions. There's no other way around that.
Despite all the good government work and statistics, and despite the government departments, DSE and DPI, doing things on climate change, and all the community groups with Landcare and the Alliance, we still don't have a sort of an integrated, coordinated approach to things. How do we best optimise, the good work of people like Karen are doing to make sure we, from what we've got, we make the most of it?
I think in my horrendously complicated flowchart that I solved that answer to it, which is that, we live in a connected social system, and so what I believe, need to have is strong national leadership that sets the priorities for climate change and biodiversity protection. But there's got to be vertical integration. The only place that actual change happens is where Karen lives. It's locally. So natural resource management groups, the catchment management authorities, I think would argue that you need nationally accredited regional plans, right, for the sorts of plantings you want, the biodiversity outcomes you want, the water quality you want, the sort of rivers you want. But those goals that are set locally need to be consistent with the bigger story about how Australia is playing its part, the management of a continent, for goodness sake, no one else is doing that, how those national objectives, they need to flow down through the state to the regional level. And I think we need a huge sort of rocket injection of resources and commitment, and that's where a Council of Australian Governments agreement, backed by appropriate revenue, could do that. Because apart from, there's no doubt, we live in a complex situation, and it is dispiriting, but I'm confident that we do actually have the skeleton of those institutions. You look at what local people are doing in regional catchment management groups. Yes, it's patchy, and it differs between where there's areas that have great social resilience and have the resources to look after country. That differs across the whole nation. But there is extraordinary things going on. There's undoubtedly good things going on at a state level. Yes, we need some major traction at the national level, but the edges of the solution are there. We have to make them nimble and flexible and adaptive. But let's also remember there is no end point. We're not going to get to condition X and go, all right, let's go and have a lie down and a gin and tonic, it's all over. One of the values that we need to bring to this problem is the continuing pursuit of excellence in our care of our country. And that's just continual improvement. There's no end point. We're going to muck up, but we need a culture that rewards and is prepared to experiment, to make mistakes, and to look at what's good in what we have now and keep it and adapt it, and to all the rest of it, dig a big hole down the back paddock and bury it. But we have the skeletons there, the structures, to move it on. Hopefully, Stuart, that answers some of your question.
Will spoke about a change from a conservation approach that was perhaps trying to keep things the way they were or move things back to the way they were in 1770, and that a very different, more nimble approach needs to be taken now. And I was just wondering if you could flesh that out with sort of a bit more concrete, practical examples of the sorts of those issues, that contrast.
Yeah, a couple of examples. A lot of people have sort of said, well, do you mean national parks won't be as valuable in the future as they are now? And the answer is no, they're probably even more valuable, but for possibly a different reason. And that is they are a reservoir of well-functioning ecosystems in general, which we're going to need as species move in and out of them. So that brings me to one practical thing. We need to look for new refugia for clusters of species and new ecosystems as they form. One of the things we're learning from looking at very rapid climatic changes in the past is that biodiversity in general comes through those fairly well, but that was before we had large fragmented landscapes and lots of different new invasive species. And that comes through it well because a lot of refugia form, which are reservoirs for biodiversity, which then spread out again when the climate stabilizes. So one practical example of a new way of approaching things is to look for new refugia as they form, as they try to form on landscapes, and try to preserve them and connect them as well. Again, that's a part of being nimble and being alert to changes that you're observing. The second thing I would say is sort of hedging your bets, and Victoria might be a good example here. Let's take the example of large cleared forested areas from forestry operations or post-bushfire, and we want to assist regeneration. Well, here's an example of being a bit more nimble. You could take 3 possible climatic futures. One is a recovery, where temperature continues to rise till the end of the century, and then starts coming down because we've mitigated very vigorously. Number 2, we stabilize at a much higher temperature, 3 or 4 degrees higher. Number 3, runaway. We don't have it under control as a global society. It keeps going up. You may want to try to reestablish different tree species as your key species, structuring species, depending on which scenario you think is more likely. Or, even more nimbly, you may want to plant patches in each of those 3, according to each of those 3 scenarios, and hedge your bets in a way. So there are a number of things we can do using sort of fundamental ecological knowledge combined with some simple climatic scenarios to be a bit more nimble as to how we think about conservation in the future. Those are a couple of examples.
Please join me in thanking Karen and Paul and Will for their really wonderful presentations. And to all of you, thank you so much for joining us today. And we really take so much heart in the expertise and the passion and the commitments for the natural environment that is so evident in the Victorian community. And I know there's so many of you in the audience who are deeply involved in many different facets of nature conservation. And for the Alliance, we see part of our role as tapping into this tremendous support. We're working together as an alliance of 9 environment groups because we know that we need a statewide approach to solving this biodiversity crisis. Our vision for Victoria is big, and together we can achieve it. So we've talked a lot about what's needed, about resilience and about policy, and we have a wonderful graph from Paul of how to get there. So clearly we need better policy and, of course, greatly increased resources. So Paul said we need to start taking the environment as seriously as our hospitals and our schools. We're all part of the environment, and what we need is a much greater investment in the natural environment. So if you want to know what you can do to keep up to date with our work and to see how you can help, how you can get involved with some of the work that like Karen's doing, or if you need for letter writing and so on, please do sign up to our e-bulletin. We'll keep you informed. So there's those slips of paper on your chairs. So if you haven't done so already, please do join our e-bulletin list to keep up to date with our work and biodiversity issues across the state. We also have a website, www.victorianaturally.org.au. So thank you all again so much for coming. Thank you particularly to our speakers and to the Sustainable Living Festival for making this forum possible. Thank you to John Sampson, to Karen Alexander, to Amelia Easdale, Chris Cook, Tim Finger and Yasmin Kelsall. So if you do have any questions, Karen and Amelia are up the back, and please do come down. We have a stall down at Birrarung Ma by the river. So I think the take-home message today is let's not be little penguins. Let's actually solve not just climate change, but all the legacy of problems that are facing our natural environment. The Victoria Naturally Alliance looks forward to taking a journey with you over the next year and into the future, and thank you.